الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له. واشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأن محمدا عبد الله ورسوله. In the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful. As we come together in the second Friday since the holy month of Ramadan, it's important for us to think about our ibadah and how we will continue the traditions of Ramadan and the good habits that we built during Ramadan into the next part of the year. And as we should be thinking about this, we understand that we have brothers and sisters around the world who are suffering during this time. Namely, our brothers and sisters in Palestine. As we come together on this second Friday, we know that our brothers and sisters in Gaza are trying to rebuild. For over 90,000 people in Gaza, which is a very small area, are now homeless, displaced in their own area, in their own community. And we saw today at Masjid al-Aqsa as Palestinians came to worship at one of our most holy sites, that Israeli forces attacked these worshipers. They were met with tear gas and stun grenades. And we know that our brothers and sisters around the world are suffering right now. And as a community, as Muslims living here at a level of privilege, many of our hearts and our minds are focusing on our brothers and sisters. And it's in times like these where we must look to our prophetic tradition, and we must look to the teachings of the Quran for guidance, for truth, and how we must act during these times. It's a common idea in education that the easiest way to give a lesson and to teach someone something is through a story. And we know that in the Quran we are given examples and stories of our prophets and of people we must look up to so that we may benefit and so that we may learn. In the Quran, the most told story, one of the most told stories is the story of our Prophet Musa, alayhi salam. In the story of Prophet Musa, many of us know this, and this is something that we may share with our children and our family members. But it's important that when we look at these stories, we try to understand every level of guidance that there may be. And when we talk about the story of Prophet Musa, we understand that Prophet Musa was sent to Bani Israel to save them from their oppressors, from Pharaoh. And we know that initially Prophet Musa preached to Pharaoh. And when Pharaoh did not listen, we saw that Musa was ordered to take his people and leave. When Musa took his people, they finally reached the sea. And as they reached the sea, they see that Pharaoh and his army are not far behind. And we know, and it's told to us in the Quran, that Prophet Musa's people, Bani Israel, started to freak out. And they started to condemn him and doubt him. And in the face of that, Prophet Musa said, Inna ma'ya Rabbi sayahdeen. Indeed, my Lord is with me, He will guide me. Prophet Musa had no doubt that Allah would guide him in that moment. And we know that after this, God says that He brought down orders and guidance to Musa. And what was that order and what was that guidance? Allah says in the Quran, فَأَوْحَيْنَا إِلَيْهِ أَنِ اضْرِبْ بِعَصَاكَ الْبَحْرِ. And we revealed to him to hit the water with his staff. Subhanallah. In this time, in this very stressful time for Prophet Musa, when he's dealing with his people who do not understand and who are worried, and when he sees the Pharaoh coming to wipe out his people and him, and right in front of them is the sea, and Allah orders him to hit the water with his staff. It's important to note that Prophet Musa, in this time, in this very stressful time, does as he's ordered. Now we all understand that Prophet Musa on his own cannot split the sea. And we understand that Allah could split the sea without Musa doing anything. But Musa had no doubt, and Musa did his job. And we see that not only was Prophet Musa alayhi salam saved, him and his people were saved, but in that same action with the sea splitting, Allah destroyed his enemies. Allah destroyed Pharaoh and his army. The Quran also tells us of the story of a community. In Surah Al-Baqarah, towards the end of the second juz', Allah tells us about a community from Bani Israel who were being oppressed who were tired of being oppressed. And Allah tells us this story, and it says that these people went to their prophet and they told him, we need a leader, we need a king, so that we may fight for ourselves, fight in the path of Allah against our oppressors. And the prophet questions them and he says, what if I bring you a king? What if Allah gives you a king and you guys do not believe in him and you guys refuse to follow him? And they said, why would we refuse to follow him when we are being oppressed, when we need his help in his leadership? And of course we know that with Bani Israel, they did not initially accept this man's leadership. The Prophet came back and gave them a leader by the name of Talut. Talut was given ownership and leadership over his people. And initially they didn't believe in him. And the Prophet reaffirmed Talut's leadership and Talut's kingship. And finally, Talut was able to take his people out to fight. Of course, because of the time constraints, Talut was not able to train his people the way he wanted to. So the first opportunity he got, Talut tested his people, tested his troops. And the way he tested them was that when they passed by a river, he said that whoever drinks from the river without control is not from my army. And we know that many people in Talut's army, which was already a very small force, were removed because they did not pass this test. And finally, Talut and the men who passed the test met their oppressors on the battlefield. And we know that the oppressors that they faced were led by a man named Jalut, or Goliath in English. We know that Goliath was a very big person. Some would call him a giant. And we know that that Goliath had a huge force. And as the people of Talut finally get to the battlefield, the Quran describes the reaction looking at the force that's standing against them. And these people who had passed the test and were considered good people and worthy of being in Talut's army said, قالوا لا طاقة لنا اليوم بجالوت وجنوده. They said that there is no way that we will be able to face this army today. How can we face them? And from them came a smaller group who responded to them. And the way Allah describes them in the Quran, قَالَ الَّذِينَ يَظُنُّونَ أَنَّهُمْ مُلَاقُ اللَّهِ. That these were people who knew that one day they would have to answer to Allah. That they would have to face Allah and say and testify to what they did that day. And their response to their brothers, to their comrades on the battlefield was كَم مِّن فِئَةٍ قَلِيلَةٍ غَلَبَتْ فِئَةً كَثِيرَةً بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ. How many times has a small force been able to defeat a larger force through the will of Allah? إِنَّ اللَّهَ مَعَ الصَّابِرِينَ. Indeed, Allah is with those who are patient. So they reassured their brothers because of their fear of Allah. And we know that from this small group came a boy by the name of Dawood. And we know that Dawood was able to kill Goliath in this battle. One of the smallest people in a small army defeating the largest person in a larger army. And we know that Dawood eventually became a prophet after this. And he's someone that we respect and look up to. The Quran then takes us to the beautiful story of the mother of Isa alayhi salam, Maryam. And we know that one of the miracles of Prophet Isa was that he was born to a virgin mother. And we know the story of Maryam that's told to us in Surah Al Imran and told to us in Surah Maryam, where it tells us that Maryam was scared. And Maryam left Jerusalem when she became pregnant. And we know that when she was giving birth, she was alone. And the Quran tells us that as she was giving birth, the pain and the stress got to her. It bothered her. And it tells us about her sadness when she says, and it's quoted in the Quran, يا ليتني مت قبل هذا وكنت نسيا منسيا. That I wish that I had died before this and I had long been forgotten. This is the mother of Jesus speaking. It's a woman that we all look up to as Muslims. The stress and the pain got to her. And we're told that she was responded to. فناداها من تحتها ألا تحزني قد جعل ربك تحتك سريا. That the voice from under her told her not to be sad. That there is a stream under her. And we know that in this encounter she was given sustenance. But the key idea here, when she was given this sustenance, is that she was ordered to work for it. She had to push the date palm tree that was next to her. She was ordered to shake it so that her dates would come down. Now we all understand, or many of us may understand, that date palm trees can't be shook. You can't go to the bottom of a date tree and start trying to push it and expect for dates to fall down. That's not how it works. And when you take into consideration the state that Maryam was in, as she is pregnant, she's about to give birth, she can't shake a tree. So we understand that Maryam did her best. She touched the tree, and her sustenance was brought down to her. And with these specific examples that are given to us, there's a common theme. And that's when Allah wants good for you. And when Allah wants to give you success, Allah requires you to do your work. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم. بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد. When we talk about our prophets and we talk about these specific examples, Allah shows us the importance of doing our work. In a hadith that was narrated, it talks about a Bedouin man who went up to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and asked the Prophet, should I tie my camel or should I trust in Allah? The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, tie your camel and trust in Allah. When we talk about these specific stories, when we talk about Prophet Musa alayhi salam, we understand Prophet Musa did not have the ability to split the sea. And we know that Allah split the sea and saved Bani Israel. But Allah still required Prophet Musa to do his part. And what was his part? To hit the sea with his staff. And when we talk about Maryam, we understand that she was pregnant. She wasn't able to gather her own sustenance. But Allah still required her to touch the tree, to do her part. And when we talk about the people of Talut, the small force that had gotten up and work together to fight against their oppressor. We see one of the most important lessons that we could understand. And that is that the work we do, we will be questioned for. The way the Quran described them was that they were people who expected that one day they would have to answer to Allah. قَالَ الَّذِينَ يَظُنُّونَ أَنَّهُمْ مُلَاقُ اللَّهِ. They knew that one day they would have to answer for what they did. They would have to answer for what they did that day. They would have to answer for what they did when their people were being oppressed. Brothers and sisters, how many times do we see what's going on to our brothers and sisters and understand that we will be asked about that? How many times do we see what's happening to our brothers and sisters in Palestine and think that Allah will be asking us what happens to them? Brothers and sisters, every single one of us will be asked what we have done for our brothers and sisters, no matter where they are. But the question is, how many of us have thought to ourselves that we need to do something to prepare for that day? How many of us have understood our obligation to our people around the world? How many of us have thought, let me do something about it? With the recent siege and the recent bombardment of Gaza, we saw many people doing what they could. But we also saw a lot of people saying they felt helpless. With the recent situation that happened in Palestine, around Palestine, whether it be in Sheikh Jarrah, or Masjid al-Aqsa, or Gaza, or 1948 Palestine, many people said they felt helpless. Brothers and sisters, we're not allowed to feel helpless yet. We cannot feel helpless when we live in a country that is complicit in the murder of our brothers and sisters. When the bombs that are raining down on Gaza come from America, are funded by America. When the bullets that are killing Palestinian youth in the West Bank and in Jerusalem are funded by America. When the settlers who are trying to expel and ethnically cleanse Sheikh Jarrah are being funded by groups here in America, you cannot say that there is nothing we can do. Brothers and sisters, we will be asked about this on the Day of Judgment. And all Allah requires of us is to do our part. It's not difficult. We understand, لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. Allah will not test us more than we're capable. But if we're not doing what we're capable of, then how will we answer to Allah? How will we meet Allah on the Day of Judgment when He asks us, what did you do when the third holiest masjid was under attack? When they desecrated the third holiest masjid in the final days of the holy month of Ramadan. Brothers and sisters, I'm coming to you today with work that we could do to support our brothers and sisters. I come to you today from American Muslims for Palestine. We're a national organization that has been educating and advocating for Palestine here in America for over a decade now. Brothers and sisters, you know us because we come here often, and we're often updating you. And it is through your support and through the work that this community has done that we have been able to make amazing strides for Palestine. It's very easy to feel helpless, but we need to understand what's been going on. As these problems have been happening in Palestine, we see that Congress has been taking a better stance on Palestine. We see that the American public as a whole has been taking a better stance on Palestine. Even the media is saying things they never used to say about Palestine. In the past few months alone, over 4 letters have come from Congress sent to the State Department in support of Palestinian rights. Letters that stand against ethnic cleansing. Letters that stand against apartheid. Letters that stand against Israel not vaccinating Palestinians. That is the work that we're doing. In the month of Ramadan, we saw the most comprehensive, most damaging bill in support of the Palestinian people come out. H.R. 2590, put in by Congresswoman Betty McCollum. This bill would take money away from Israel for harming Palestinian children and their families. This bill holds Israel accountable. These are things that we never thought of before, that we never thought could happen. But the opportunities are here for us. And just this week, as a ceasefire was announced in Gaza, we saw two bills, one coming from Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to stop the sale of $735 million worth of weapons to go to Israel. And just yesterday, Senator Bernie Sanders matched it in the Senate. Now we know that this is going up for a debate. And for the first time in history, in the Senate, Israeli weapons will be debated, whether or not we should be giving Israel weapons. 10 years ago, we didn't think this could happen. But it's through the efforts that we have been doing as a community, as AMP, that we are seeing this change. Brothers and sisters, one day we will have to answer to Allah for what's going on with the Palestinian people and for what's going on with all our brothers and sisters. But we need to understand the only way we will be able to face Allah on the day of judgment is if we were able to do our part. Brothers and sisters, I'm coming to you today asking you to do your part. Help support our work so we could take this to another level. We all know that a ceasefire means nothing to the Palestinian people, because a ceasefire doesn't end the occupation. It doesn't end their oppression. It doesn't end their murder. A ceasefire means that Palestinians will be oppressed in a different way. But that also means that we, as Americans, people who live in the United States, in a country that is supporting Israel's apartheid policies, Israel's oppressive policies, that we must work. And I ask you, inshallah, after the prayers to help support our work, inshallah. Brothers and sisters, we don't want to be able to see Allah one day and be able to not say that we did what we needed to do. We did what we were able to do. Today, let's do what we're able to do, inshallah. Allahumma hdina fi man hadayt, wa afina fi man afayt, wa tawallana fi man tawallayt, wa barik lana Allahumma fi ma a'tayt. Allahumma harrir Falastinana, Allahumma harrir Aqsana, Allahumma harrir bilad al-Muslimina ajma'in. We ask Allah to make us of those who will see a free Palestine, to make us of those who will pray in Masjid al-Aqsa. We ask Allah to make us of those who will do their parts whenever they're able to. We ask Allah to make us of those who will be able to testify on the day of judgment, saying we did all we could do. Wa akhiru da'wana anil hamdulillahi rabbil alameen wa aqimis salah.
الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
سووا صفوفكم يرحمكم الله. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. إن الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات كانت لهم جنات الفردوس نزلا خالدين فيها لا يبغون عنها حولا قل لو كان البحر مدادا لكلمات ربي لنفد البحر قبل أن تنفد كلمات ربي ولو جئنا بمثله مددا قل إنما أنا بشر مثلكم يوحى إلي أنما إلهكم إله واحد فمن كان يرجو لقاء ربه فليعمل عملا صالحا ولا يشرك بعبادة ربه أحدا. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. كذلك ما أتى الذين من قبلهم من رسول إلا قالوا ساحر أو مجنون أتواصوا به بل هم قوم طاغون فتول عنهم فما أنت بملوم وذكر فإن الذكرى تنفع المؤمنين وما خلقت الجن والإنس إلا ليعبدون ما أريد منهم من رزق وما أريد أن يطعمون. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.